This week on The Handle. Learn about the fascinating career of an Amarillo photographer. Then meet an Amarillo poet with weather on her mind. And an Amarillo chef making big strides. Plus, get your paddle ready for Amarillo's Garage Pong Circuit. All of this right now on Panhandle PBS as we tell the stories of the Texas Panhandle.
Oh, I don't care if I'm remembered as an artist. You'll be remembered or you won't be remembered. I'm Scott Hyde. I'm a freelance photographer. That's what I've been all my life. I always used 35 millimeter black and white cameras like this one, which I carry around in my pocket in a gab bag. So now they're digital. Oh, I love the digital cameras. You can shoot like a machine gun. You don't have to stop and reload the film every 36 exposures, you know. And so I shoot at a wild rate.
Are you ever without that camera?
No, not far. I shower and shave without it because it doesn't hold up good in the shower.
My name's Renee Dantes. I am the archivist for Scott Hyde. Whenever I started, I said, you know, there's probably at least 5,000 or 6,000 pictures in this thing, and I was like, it's going to take me forever. And then I looked at the negatives and I realized in one box there was about 20,000. So I knew then I was wrong. And that it was going to take me a lot longer than a few years to do this.
My pictures, I have pictures in museums all around, and some in Europe, I guess. Britain, I know for sure, but I don't follow that. Getting famous is not my goal. I'm not in the least bit interested in being famous.
Really, the mission for what the archive has become is so that the public and sort of art history can be informed by what he actually did in his lifetime, which was take interesting shots of not only visual art photography, but the streets of New York City, buildings being constructed, the jazz musicians.
I was good friends with a musician named Bob Duro. He's not so well known now. He was a fine piano player, singer, and arranger, and worked a lot around the music scene and got me in touch with people in that world.
Bob Duro, he had jam sessions in his apartment, and there are photographs of the vantage points of Scott being on the floor, looking up at the drummer. He's underneath the table, and he's getting these great shots with cigarette smoke in the air and these strange things hanging on the wall, but these people are doing what they love.
And there's Birdland, and there's Charlie Parker, and Dizzy Gillespie, and Thelonious Monk, all those fine 50s, 60s jazz musicians. Charlie Parker would show up late, but he was a bad boy, but fine musician, you know. Oh, they were pretty cool. They were just folks. I sold a few of my own pictures, which to album people, and got acquainted that way. And they were nice. I think they paid a red hot $100 or something like that.
It wasn't until I realized that, or I was looking through some of these pictures, much like the ones that are in here, that there was a photograph of Robert Watts, Roy Lichtenstein, and Robert Filiu sitting at one of their kitchen tables. I was like, Scott, did you know these people? And at that moment I knew I would never be as cool as him, and the stuff that I was working on was far more important than just pieces of paper that he wanted me to put together.
I can't believe what she's done for me with all this stuff. I'd have probably dumped it all by now.
The scope of what is here is not only his negatives, but his prints, the books that he was a part of, the postcards. We have correspondence from people like Allen Ginsberg. When he took a photograph of Allen on TV, he sent it to Allen, and then Allen sent him a postcard, thanks, and then there was another correspondence later of asking another question. So these connections and this web that exists around Scott is really interesting, and it needs to be told, and so that's what my job now is.
Did you know Andy Warhol?
Very briefly, I did a picture of Andy one time. I had a project where I did 24 artists' left hands in collaboration with Robert Filiu, and he cooked up this notion of doing artists' hands, some of them European friends of his, and artists friends of mine, and we did Andy's left hand.
Filiu found Scott through George Brecht, and the hand show was actually taken mainly here in the United States. Scott was here, and then it was shown primarily in Europe. There's a box that Robert had made that has the 24 of the hands, and it has John Cage, and it has Roy Lichtenstein and Klaus Oldenburg, Allison Knowles, Io. It has Scott, and it has Robert. It has Andy Warhol in it. It has Jasper Johns. It has Ray Johnson. There's so many. I can't always remember all of their names, but there's both European and American artists. And one time I asked him, well, why didn't you get Rauschenberg while you were at it? He's like, he was overseas.
Oh, I thought it was an interesting device, an interesting process and technique and notion, and an excuse for making pictures.
The Tiffany windows designer for Tiffany's jewelry store, he used 5 of the hands in his Tiffany's windows displays. And so there's watches and cufflinks and that sort of thing in front of the 5 hands. And they each got their own window, and it's very interesting to see how they used those very large blown up hands that I believe all 5 of those now are at MoMA, but the hands were used in very interesting ways.
And when we had the pictures published, there was some crosstalk and input from people who specialized in palmistry and gave insights on the hands, but I didn't involve myself in that. I involved myself on making the patterns in the hand visible. Those were very rich years in the evolution of art. I was very interested in modern art, especially when you get to New York, and there's the Museum of Modern Art and the Guggenheim and other fine museums. But I continued as an art photographer and eventually applied for and got a Guggenheim Fellowship.
All of the big New York museums, they have his holdings. He is in Lima, Peru, Israel. I believe those are some of the images of the synagogues in New York. And then there's also some at Tate. There's some in France, the National Gallery in France. He's pretty much all over. In 2015, I went up and looked at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and in MoMA's collection, and to see what all they had. And it's actually really funny about MoMA. When Scott still lived in New York and was in the 60s or 70s, he would go to MoMA and ask to see his box. And so they'd bring it out, they'd give it to him, they'd leave the room. He would look through it, but then he'd stash a couple of extra prints. So when I went back to look at his box at MoMA, I had to tell them that they had some prints they needed to a session because they didn't know they were there. So that's the sort of thing that it's endearing, and it shows the playful nature of Scott and his work, and I absolutely love that about everything that he does.
She's gonna make me famous.
I'm not making you famous, I'm making you relevant. There's a difference.
I don't look through the camera to be captured. I just look with my poor old eyeballs, and if something gathers me up, I whoop out my camera.
My mom was an elementary school teacher, and she taught me to read and write when I was around 3 or 4 years old. So books were my best friends. I didn't have a lot of friends that I played with. I had books. So I was the kid sitting on the playground reading the book, and during recess in elementary school, I would stay in and shelve books for the library. My name is Shara Hammonds, and I am a poet here in Amarillo, Texas. You weren't stuck anywhere if you had a book. You could do all kinds of things that you couldn't do in real life, and you could travel all sorts of places and meet all kinds of people and animals. Tornado Alley. It's a house shaker, cellar thumper, the sort that we are warned about, but not all of us have basements, so we fit into our closets when it comes. Just widened out eyes and elbows while the outside air boils and sings with electricity. One of my earliest memories of a tornado was whenever I was in first grade. I went to Ridgecrest Elementary, and I remember I was in the car with my mom and my little brother, and we were coming home from the grocery store, and there was a tornado dropping out of the cloud behind us. That was the first, I think, real encounter I had where it made an impression with me of something that was dangerous and exhilarating, but there's something attractive about that danger. We grow up with it, always know this might happen to us, that we will sit in our groaning box in a sea of wind and will wait under pillows that must stop whatever pieces of cars pierce the walls, so we have planned ahead, know the safest room. We know that while we wait, the rebar will be ripped from the concrete, the studs will be stripped, sandblasted with topsoil, hail will beat the nearly wild roses flat. The bells at the non-denominational church will cling like mad yelling saints, the power will flicker, the lights may go out, the garage door thrown off so the house is a vacuum, but the warning sirens are always a thrill when they start up. But I do remember a few years back when we got those tornadoes that were flattening small towns. And I think I was living outside of Umbarger at the time, and there was a train at the end of our street, a train track. So one time we thought there was a train there, but it was really a tornado that we heard. The way that families freeze to listen at first. They pause in their meals or their small talk, and suddenly hear tree branches already slapping the dust off their houses, and the spitting rain that saturates the brick red like when it was new. The windows rattling, and the mile-long rumble that might not be a freight train. We know more about meteorology than most. A ridge of low pressure, straight-line winds, Gulf moisture were in our bedtime stories. The storm will pass soon. The worst ones wear themselves out fast with their violence, and the morning will sparkle with dew and bent metal, the roots of the cottonwoods like old fingers, finally holding the sky like something they'd hoped for. My teachers were really good at encouraging me from a very early age. I would finish tests or homework early and write poetry afterwards, and then they would come across and see what I was doing and read it to the class. So that really encouraged me because it made me think that it was good. We have rebuilt now so many times that nobody thinks it's unusual if you never find some of what blew away. We will go outside to see what still stands, meet our neighbors assessing the storm and what the new day is like, preening in its calm. We'll call it a good day for repairing the damage, a good thing that things were not worse. The weather is our culture, what we have in common, all we really know how to talk about. I took a creative writing class at Amarillo College. I was actually a photography major first. So I took a creative writing class as an elective, and the professor at the time, Bruce McGinnis, sent some of my poems, unbeknownst to me, to a contest that was run by the Texas Association of Creative Writing Teachers. And it won second place, and I got to do my first reading, and that's when I thought, maybe this is something that I really am good at and should put more energy into. I felt like he was the first one who really saw the potential that I had in this particular area, and because of him, that's why I pursued it. Do I need to get Kevin off?
He's good.
Okay.
I think. Well, you think? Well, I mean, I think that's
Hi.
true. So, that was just a kind of an awkward tale.
Okay, there we go. And I don't know really what to say about him. He's his own creature.
During the growing season, Panhandle PBS collaborated with West Texas Chef's Table for a series of meals we call Savor the Goods. Rocky Dunham was among the chefs who focused their talents on our farm-to-table theme.
So I competed on Cutthroat Kitchen with Alton Brown. The battle was Battle Oatmeal Raisin Cookie. I am Executive Chef Rocky Dunham with the Bivens Foundation, Bivens Point, 1949 Catering, and my personal brand, Rocked Recipes. I decided, because trying to play strategy of the game, that there's gonna be something happen that I'm not gonna be able to use an oven. So I decided really early in the round that I'm gonna go with a no-bake cookie. From the area, right? Everybody in the Amarillo area understands no-bake cookies. We probably all had it. And fact is, I thought it was a common occurrence. Susan Finnegar disagreed. When I presented the no-bake cookie, decided to inform me that a competition like that, and particularly in the final round, wasn't the time or place to invent a dish like a no-bake cookie. I was pre-law going into college, and I really think if I were sitting at a desk right now, I would just hate my life. When my parents divorced when I was younger, my dad, who I lived with at the time, can't cook to save his life. So I understand really quickly that I've got to do one of two things, either learn to do it better myself or just learn to enjoy horrible food. So I started cooking some small things, never really anything too intricate. It wasn't until college that I would sit in class almost every day, and I couldn't wait to get to my restaurant job. And that's when I realized that that's probably what I should be doing for the rest of my life. I was a good server and a good bartender, and then kind of trying to diversify myself, thought maybe culinary school would be the best way to do that, kind of learn the back of house. I went to Le Cordon Bleu North America in Scottsdale, Arizona. At the time was Scottsdale Culinary Institute. Since then has been shut down. A lot of people don't realize that Le Cordon Bleu actually pulled out of North America. I started there. My training was, pretty traditional, classically French trained. Following culinary school, I got an internship, which is a pretty highly competitive spot, the one that I got with celebrity chef Bo McMillan. He beat Bobby Flay on Iron Chef America. He's coached on Worst Cooks in America with Amarillo. He's now a regular judge on Guys Grocery Games. So that was really kind of where everything started, most of which was in Arizona in the Phoenix Valley. And I always knew even then that I would probably end up back in Texas at some point in time. I grew up in the area, and this is home to me. So I stayed in the Phoenix Valley. I opened a restaurant with a family friend who was Chef Joe Busson, and I spent a great number of years with him, and unfortunately he passed away. It was a little bit of a burden on the family, and we decided to sell the business and move on. That's when I realized that I'm gonna make a move into healthcare. There's a lot of things that chefs can do in healthcare because of the stigma of hospital food. Nobody really likes that. That there's a lot that we can do to improve that from both a nutrition standpoint, but also a quality standpoint. So I moved here with the Bivens Foundation and been with them for almost 6 years now, doing what we do on a scale of high-end retirement and extended care. Culture's really starting to embrace a lot of different foods, ethnicities, cuisines, and I think that's inspiring. 10, 12, 15 years ago, mostly when Food Network was probably just getting started, we didn't really have the appreciation for some of the smaller cuisines and some of the smaller things that we do. Marcus Samuelson, for one, Ethiopian cuisine. What do you know about Ethiopian cuisine? We don't, right? But now that we have access at our fingertips to that cuisine, it's really starting to open a whole new world where we can infuse and transfuse different cuisines from different parts of the world into incredible new flavorful dishes. Some of your most significant events have all been centered around a dinner table. Your first date, your family get-togethers, even your family dinners. Some of the best memories, some of the best events and occasions in our lives center around food and a meal. The word craft simply just means love and passion for what you're doing. And the fact is that we have in this area of Amarillo, of the 26 counties of the Panhandle, we have a lot of people that really love and have passion for food and what they're doing. And we're really starting to see a lot of that happen. It really has only started happening in the past couple of years, and that's super exciting.
Dunham teamed up with an urban farmer for the produce and microgreens his menu featured.
The market gardening came when I started to get healthy myself. I had 3 kids. I was feeling really sluggish. I wasn't eating properly, and I said, I can't do this to myself or my family. I'm Katie Hodges. I run Hodgepodge Farms, and we're here in Amarillo, Texas. I just started gardening, and then my friends got real excited, and the more people I talked to, the more people were excited about it. And I was like, okay, there's a market for this. And then I started meeting other growers here in Amarillo, and I'm part of a young farming coalition, and that was a lot of connections as well, just with some of the other people who had been doing it for a little bit more time than I have. Oh, I love the Canyon Farmers Market. I like the smaller town feel of it. There's some awesome vendors out there, and I have people come back to me all the time. I have a little girl who is probably 4 years old, and she thinks my microgreens are fantastic, and her parents are actually growing them for her now. I've always been around gardening my whole life. My grandfather, still to this day, he's in his 90s. He has a garden in Austin. My grandmother could take a sick plant and make it healthy. I think about her a lot while I'm out here. When I was younger, I'd work for her. I'd come over and I'd pull weeds for her, and we spent a lot of time talking out in the garden, and she liked flowers. And so she'd talk about the flowers and talk about how you do it and stuff like that. And my grandfather, when I was little, he had a Swiss Army knife, a red Swiss Army knife, and he would go out in the backyard and cut fruit for us because he had beautiful fruit trees. They're still alive. I have a cutting from a fig tree of his, that came from a cutting of his father's fig tree in Georgia. I think that people are realizing that how processed things really are, and they want to go back to, freshly picked, and it tastes better. But I know where it came from. I know that there's nothing been sprayed on it. I know that, I did that, and it's a good feeling. I tell people this is my church. I come here and I relax, and when I'm frustrated, I can come out here and work and pull weeds, and it works. It is definitely my happy and safe and spiritual place.
The idea of farm to table, the idea and the concept of bringing something that we have in the area. We have all these great local farms, these local growers, even down to Katie Hodges, who I've partnered with for this dinner. She's got an urban farm that I've driven by, no joke, hundreds of times. Supporting her is buying her kids ballet slippers. Supporting her is buying and allowing her kids to go to church camp. I could very easily call my distributor, a nationwide large distributor, call them and say, hey, I need a case of okra, and I would have it in my door in a couple of hours. That's not a problem to me. It's about that craft and that love and that passion and what we do with that. So we're supporting the local community, and we're supporting the local families.
I'm Jeff Wyrick. I am the unofficial commissioner of our ping pong league here in town. I started when I was about to sell a table on Craigslist and figured we'd just take it out and give it one last go, and just kind of blossom from there. We thought, it went pretty well. We had about 8 guys show up. Last tournament that we had 25 players on 3 tables. Typically, we try to find someone to volunteer a space if we can. An event like this was more because of the elements. Summer nights in the garage is not really a great place to spend too much time, so we decided to do it in the morning out in the park, just to kind of catch a breeze. A little more breeze than we bargained for. We're not going to be able to avoid the wind, so we'll just deal with it. Everyone will have an equal advantage, disadvantage. Obviously, competitive spirit comes out. This is what y'all are playing for. I won't name who's best, but I do know who's number 1 seed today. So Henry. A gentleman named Henry, who's comes to us from San Antonio. He got into town, and he's a bit of a gunslinger. Eric Berry is also a very, very good player. I think in large part it's just the level of, it's kind of an amateur sport, and so I think it's a pretty low barrier of entry. Most people played at some point in their life. It doesn't require any equipment, really. I mean, if someone's got a table, you can play, And it's pretty casual. It's real conducive to, socializing. I think we're kind of part of just something bigger that's happening across the country. I think for us, it's just all about community. As long as people have a good time, that's all I'm really concerned about.
Here we go.
It's funny way it happens every time. We start off with water till it just turns into wine. And I just say, sorry, mama, I'm on my way. But the engine just started low and it's making me stay. It's just been a long, long road back home. And I just been too far. Long gone. Yes, it's been a long, long road back home, and I've just been too far and long, long gone. I know this all comes when the reason rhymes. But I guess you could say we're living in troubled times. And those times it seems like you're my only friend. But everyone keeps saying there's good times around the bend. It's just been a long, long road back home, and I've just been too far and long, long gone. Yes, it's been a long, long road back home, and I've just been too far and long, long gone. Every time I turn around, all I can hear is your lonesome sound. So when I please, won't you let it stay? Make some room for better days. 'Cause yes, it's been a long, long road back home, and I've just been too far and long.